Carlos Santana's guitar sound is instantly recognizable. When he plays, his tone carries warmth, emotion, and wildness that few musicians can match. But this distinctive voice didn't emerge from nowhere. Behind Santana's musical identity lies a carefully cultivated lineage of influences, 6 master guitarists who fundamentally shaped how he approaches his instrument and his art. These aren't just casual inspirations or passing interests. These are the musicians Santana considers his personal teachers, the artists who gave him permission to explore new territories and express his deepest emotions through music. Each one contributed something essential to the Carlos Santana we know today. The Foundation, B.B. King's emotional truth. B.B. King stands as perhaps the most foundational influence in Santana's musical development. From his earliest days as a young musician in San Francisco's Mission District during the 1960s, Santana was completely absorbed by King's approach to the blues. He would listen obsessively to Live at the Regal, King's legendary 1965 performance, studying every note and bend. What drew Santana to B.B. King wasn't just his technical ability, but his emotional honesty. King had a way of making his guitar sing with human feeling, choosing notes that carried deep meaning rather than simply filling space with sound. This concept of letting notes breathe and cry became central to Santana's own playing style. You can hear this influence clearly in songs like Samba Pati, where Santana's sustained, expressive phrases directly reflect what he learned from King. Santana's admiration for B.B. King went far beyond music. He saw King as a healer, someone who used his art to bring people together across racial and cultural boundaries. This vision of music as a unifying force became a cornerstone of Santana's own philosophy. He often spoke about how King gave him permission to bridge different musical traditions, combining blues guitar with Latin rhythms, and creating something entirely new. The relationship between the two musicians was built on mutual respect. King once told Santana backstage that he had taken what King did and made it speak Spanish, which Santana treasured as validation of his artistic vision. Even as Santana achieved massive commercial success with albums like Supernatural, he never forgot the debt he owed to B.B. King's emotional vocabulary and spiritual approach to music. When King passed away in 2015, Santana mourned not just the loss of a musical giant, but the departure of a spiritual guide. He placed King alongside other transcendent figures like Bob Marley, John Coltrane, and Miles Davis, showing just how deeply this influence ran through his entire artistic life. The spiritual seeker, John McLaughlin's transcendent vision, the early 1970s marked a period of profound transformation for Carlos Santana, and at the center of this change stood John McLaughlin. McLaughlin had already revolutionized jazz-rock fusion with his Mahavishnu Orchestra, creating music that combined ferocious technical ability with spiritual urgency. When Santana encountered this sound, it was like witnessing a musical revolution. Santana described McLaughlin as someone who was restructuring how the guitar could sound in jazz and music generally, but their collaboration went far beyond mere musical appreciation. McLaughlin introduced Santana to the teachings of spiritual guru Sri Chinmoy, leading both musicians into a shared journey of devotion and self-discovery. Their collaboration resulted in the album Love, Devotion, Surrender, recorded in late 1972. This wasn't a commercial calculation, but a spiritual calling. The album featured interpretations of John Coltrane's sacred music, particularly A Love Supreme, which both musicians viewed as holy ground. For Santana, playing Coltrane's compositions was an act of reverence, a way of connecting with something beyond the physical world. What Santana learned from McLaughlin went beyond guitar technique. He discovered how to listen not just to music, but to silence and spirit. McLaughlin played from what Santana called the inside of the mind, channeling something divine through his instrument. This approach to music as a form of meditation and transcendence became integral to Santana's own spiritual development. The collaboration wasn't without challenges. Critics and fans were divided about the abstract, improvisational nature of their music. Rock audiences found it too complex, while jazz purists questioned the fusion of styles. But Santana didn't care about commercial reception. He was playing to grow spiritually, to reach towards something supreme. Even decades later, Santana continued to speak of McLaughlin with the same awe and respect. Their reunion performances showed that the spiritual connection they had forged in the 1970s remained strong, proving that some musical bonds transcend time and changing circumstances. The Galactic Artist, Jimi Hendrix's otherworldly expression. Jimi Hendrix represented something beyond conventional guitar playing to Carlos Santana. When Santana first witnessed Hendrix perform in the late 1960s at venues like the Santa Clara Fairgrounds, he felt he was seeing someone who didn't just play music, but painted with sound on a cosmic scale. Hendrix took audiences to the galaxy and back in a single breath, creating experiences that went far beyond entertainment. The two musicians shared the psychedelic landscape of San Francisco's vibrant music scene, breathing the same creative atmosphere and exploring similar questions about consciousness and expression. Though they never recorded together, their spiritual kinship was undeniable. Santana remembered not just Hendrix the performer, but his family, including his father who visited Santana's home, creating a personal connection that added depth to their musical relationship. What set Hendrix apart for Santana wasn't just his technical innovation, but his intention. While others might have used psychedelic experiences for chaos or spectacle, Hendrix channeled them into clarity. Santana saw Hendrix as someone who could dance with both insanity and sanity, making it all work together in service of a higher artistic vision. Hendrix's influence on Santana extended far beyond their shared era. Even when creating his comeback album Supernatural in 1999, Santana's primary concern was whether Hendrix would have approved of the music. This ongoing conversation with Hendrix's spirit shows how deeply the influence ran. For Santana, Hendrix's opinion didn't die with him, but continued to serve as an internal compass for artistic integrity. The tragedy of Hendrix's early death at age 27 only intensified Santana's respect for his legacy. Santana understood that Hendrix had given the world a glimpse of possibilities that might never be seen again. This sense of responsibility to carry forward Hendrix's vision of music as transcendence became part of Santana's own mission as an artist. At Woodstock, both musicians performed legendary sets that captured the spirit of their generation. While they didn't play together, their shared experience of that historic festival created another bond between them. Santana saw Hendrix's performance, particularly his version of The Star-Spangled Banner, as speaking for an entire generation, using music to reflect society's complexities and contradictions. The cultural bridge builder, Gabor Szabo's hidden influence. Hungarian guitarist Gabor Szabo occupies a unique place in Santana's pantheon of influences. While less famous than some of the other masters, Szabo's impact on Santana's musical development was profound and lasting. Santana discovered Szabo during the late 1960s, at the same time he was building the signature sound that would make him famous. Szabo's life story resonated with Santana on multiple levels. Having fled Hungary after the failed 1956 uprising, Szabo immigrated to America with little more than his guitar, eventually becoming a significant figure in the U.S. jazz scene. This story of an immigrant artist navigating American culture while maintaining his own identity struck a chord with Santana, who was experiencing his own journey as a Mexican musician in San Francisco's counterculture scene. What made Szabo special was his ability to fuse different musical traditions without diluting any of them. He blended Indian classical drones, Latin grooves, and Hungarian folk melodies into something entirely personal. Santana saw in this approach a model for his own musical vision. Instead of choosing between his Latin heritage and American blues and rock, he could create something that honored all his influences. The most visible result of Szabo's influence came when Santana reinterpreted Szabo's Gypsy Queen, fusing it with Peter Green's Black Magic Woman to create one of his most successful recordings. But this wasn't just opportunistic borrowing. It was a tribute to Szabo's pioneering vision of cultural fusion in music. Santana often compared Szabo to Hendrix, noting that while Hendrix used feedback in a wild psychedelic fashion, Szabo employed it more like a drone, reflecting his deeper connection to Indian music traditions. This showed Santana different possibilities for how the guitar could be used as an expressive instrument. The personal relationship between Santana and Szabo was close and meaningful. Szabo even stayed at Santana's home, and Santana had the opportunity to observe his artistic process up close. He noted Szabo's intense focus on his own development, which was in Santana admired as the dedication of a true artist rather than egotism. Szabo's relative obscurity in mainstream music history has always frustrated Santana, who believed his contributions were as significant as any of the more famous guitar heroes. Szabo died in Budapest in 1982 at age 45, but Santana has continued to honor his memory in interviews and performances, ensuring that his influence isn't forgotten. The Elegant Master, Wes Montgomery's refined grace. Wes Montgomery represented a different kind of excellence to Carlos Santana. Where other influences might have emphasized raw power or spiritual intensity, Montgomery showed Santana the beauty of refinement, elegance, and emotional precision. Santana described hearing Montgomery for the first time as being inside a Rolls-Royce, a perfect metaphor for the sophisticated luxury of Montgomery's approach to jazz guitar. Santana's introduction to Montgomery came through vinyl records in the mid-1960s, when he would skip school to listen to music at a friend's house. Among the few albums available were Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Jimi Hendrix's Axis Bold as Love, and a Wes Montgomery record. While the other albums were revolutionary in their own ways, it was Montgomery's music that struck Santana with its evolved sense of class and elegance. Montgomery's death in 1968 devastated the young Santana, who felt as though he had lost a family member. At only 20 years old, Santana was just beginning to understand Montgomery's significance, but he already knew that something precious had been taken from the world. Montgomery had passed away suddenly at age 45 from a heart attack, cutting short a career that was still reaching new heights. What set Montgomery apart was his gift for emotional clarity. In an era when many guitarists were pursuing complexity or speed, Montgomery prioritized feeling. His use of thumb picking instead of a standard pick gave his tone an earthy, human quality that resonated deeply with Santana. More importantly, it was the intention behind the notes that mattered most. Santana saw Montgomery as someone who could transform any song into something classic just by touching it. Albums like Moving West became soundtracks to Santana's life as he drove around San Francisco, absorbing Montgomery's approach to melody and harmony. The joy and gratitude that Montgomery's music evoked remained undiminished even decades later. The respect that other jazz legends had for Montgomery also impressed Santana. He revealed that John Coltrane had wanted Montgomery in his band, which underscored Montgomery's rare status as a musician who transcended category. While typically labeled as a jazz guitarist, Santana argued that Montgomery's work went beyond genre boundaries to become universally accepted music. Montgomery showed Santana that the guitar could function as an entire orchestra, capable of simultaneously articulating melody, harmony, and rhythm. This concept helped Santana develop his own layered, sustained style. During recording sessions, he would tell his bandmates that his long, lingering notes were channeling what Montgomery had taught him about making each note sacred. The lasting legacy of music. Mentorship. These 6 guitarists didn't just influence Carlos Santana's technique or style choices. They fundamentally shaped his understanding of what music could be and do in the world. From B.B. King, he learned that music should speak emotional truth. From John McLaughlin, he discovered music's spiritual dimensions. Jimi Hendrix showed him music's transcendent possibilities. Gabor Szabo demonstrated how to bridge cultures through sound. Wes Montgomery revealed the power of refined elegance. Together, these influences created the foundation for Santana's own unique voice. He didn't simply copy their approaches, but absorbed their lessons and transformed them into something distinctly his own. The Latin rhythms, blues phrasing, and psychedelic flourishes that characterize Santana's sound all trace back to lessons learned from these masters. What's remarkable is how Santana has maintained his reverence for these influences throughout his long career. Even as he achieved massive commercial success and critical acclaim, he continued to speak their names in interviews, reference them in liner notes, and honor them on stage. This ongoing gratitude reflects not just personal loyalty, but a deeper understanding of how artistic development really works. Great artists don't emerge from nothing. They build on foundations laid by previous generations, taking the best of what came before and pushing it forward into new territories. Santana's willingness to acknowledge his debts to these 6 masters demonstrates both humility and wisdom. He understands that his own success creates obligations to support and inspire the next generation of musicians. The story of Carlos Santana's influences reminds us that artistic greatness is rarely a solo achievement. It emerges from communities, relationships, and ongoing conversations between artists across time and space. By studying his masters so deeply and carrying their lessons forward so faithfully, Santana ensured that their influence would extend far beyond their own careers. Today, when young guitarists discover Carlos Santana's music, they're also encountering the spirits of B.B. King, John McLaughlin, Jimi Hendrix, Gabor Szabo, and Wes Montgomery. This is how musical traditions survive and evolve, through the dedication of artists who understand that they are links in a chain that stretches backward toward the roots and forward toward possibilities not yet imagined.